Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair everyone for joining us today. Today, inshallah, on the blessed day of Araffa, which is known as the best day of the year, we are here to discuss the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, because the days of Dhul Hijjah are the days to commemorate the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But it's not just exclusively his story, not just the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, but it's also the story of his family. Hajar alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, Sarah alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam. And his story, his family's story, is the story of our spiritual heritage. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَاتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا. And who is better in faith than those who submit their will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do good and follow the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the one who is upright, dedicated to Allah, and Allah chose Ibrahim as a close friend. This is where we get the title Khalilullah for Ibrahim alayhi salam, the friend of Allah. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also told in another verse, ثُمَّ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ أَنِ اتَّبِعْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. That we reveal to you, O Prophet, saying to follow the faith of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He is the one who is the upright, dedicated to Allah, and the one who is not of the polytheists. And so furthermore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Prophet in Surah Al-Imran, قُلْ صَدَقَ اللَّهُ فَاتَّبِعُوا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. To follow the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and to declare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the truth. And he is upright and not of the mushrikeen. So the Quran is consistently telling us, reiterating the fact that Ibrahim alayhi salam is a devout person. And another devout individual who also wants to be devout. Us are here because we want to be devout. We fast because we want to be devout. We pray because we want to be devout. In order to be a devout person, you need to follow the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself to follow the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then he commands the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to command us to follow the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so what is the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam? What is the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam? Well, the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam is a way of principles. One thing that is overlooked in our deen is that our deen and spirituality is not something that is up to the whims of our intellects and our desires. It is an intelligent religion, but it's not up to whatever makes sense to us or does not make sense to us. That does not alter the religion. And at the same time, the religion is also not at the whims or ups and downs of our emotional states. So that depending on how we feel, it will change the structure of the religion or how we'll be going forward. It's not dedicated by how society at a certain time is acting. But one of the most fascinating things of our religion is that our religion is a sirat al-mustaqim. It is a straight way. And the term mustaqim, the sirat al-mustaqim, which is what we make dua for in every prayer in Surah Al-Fatiha, istiqamah has many meanings. One of those is consistency. And we see how Islam has stood the test of time and made it through 1400 years of some of the most diverse circumstances and some of the most diverse things that a person can imagine. But what gives a Muslim istiqamah? What gives a Muslim consistency? It's the fact that our deen is a deen of principles. And as a Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who was سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called us Muslim, is a person of principles. And so the Quran is a book of principle. Our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet of principle, and our entire religion is made up of principles. And of the foremost principles, I'm going to mention 3 principles today in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam that every Muslim should follow. The first one is Tawheed. Oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a principle. And the first thing we are told in the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam is that he was a person of Tawheed. He only believed solely in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He believed in La ilaha illallah. That we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we submit only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we fear no one more than Allah, and we also love no one more than Allah. We depend only on Allah. And we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all matters. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was given very sound judgment from a very young age. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدًا. He was given sound judgment. And one day, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he challenged his people and his father. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. That remember, when he questioned his father and his people, what are these statues to which you are so devoted? So he challenged his father and his people. And there are details of conversation that goes back and forth, but in conclusion what happens is, one day, Ibrahim alayhi salam is invited to go to a festival. His people, his village, had a shirk Eid, a shirk festival that they would do. So everybody in that village went to that, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, he decided to stay back. فَقَالَ إِنِّي سَقِيمٌ. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he said, I'm really sick. I'm sick. And he's not lying because he is sick. He's sick of shirk. He's sick. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he stays back and everybody leaves. And when he stays back, he smashes the idols that his people were worshipping into pieces. And he leaves the biggest one of them. And he did this so that when they come back, they will have to face the reality of what they worship. How can you worship a creation that can be destroyed? How can you worship a creation that can't even defend itself? So Ibrahim alayhi salam's people come back from the festival and they say, who did this? Who destroyed our gods? And some of them said that we heard that there's this young man. يُقَالُ لَهُ إِبْرَاهِيم. His name is Ibrahim. He's causing problems. He's always causing fitna, telling us we shouldn't worship idols, and etc. and etc. He was speaking ill of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he was saying that Ibrahim alayhi salam is speaking ill of these idols. So the people demanded that Ibrahim alayhi salam be brought forth. That Ibrahim alayhi salam would be before the eyes of the people, and so that they make an example out of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So they brought him and they asked him, are you the one who did this to our gods, Ya Ibrahim? Are you the one who did this? And so he responded to them and he said, no. He sarcastically mentioned it was the big one, because he left the big one undestroyed, and there was the tool that he used, an axe or a hammer, whichever one that he used, he put it on the neck of the big idol to indicate that the idol was the one that actually destroyed. And he did this because he knew that it would cause his people to reflect. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, actually in Surah Al-Anbiya, that for a moment, his people started to reflect. They even started to point fingers at one another and start to say that maybe we're the ones who are actually wrongdoers. But then a few of them quickly brought them back to misguidance. And they said that we need to avenge our gods. We need to avenge our gods, and we need to punish Ibrahim alayhi salam for this act. So they decided what they're going to do is they're going to burn Ibrahim alayhi salam. We're going to make an example out of him that we will not tolerate any mistreatment of our idols. So the village comes together, the entire village, against one man. And they start building this massive fire. Everybody brings what you got. Whatever furniture you got, whatever you can do to feed this fire, put it in the fire. Offer it as a sacrifice to your gods. And the fire becomes so large, so massive, that they cannot even contain the fire. Bigger than this building. I always pictured it as like a forest fire. Like that massive. So massive that you can't go near it. So they kind of messed up because it was so big that they couldn't even put Ibrahim alayhi salam in the fire. No one can go near it. So what do? They say that they built a catapult. And some books of Islamic history say that this is the first time a catapult was ever built. And so they built this catapult, and again, one person against an entire village, and so they capture Ibrahim alayhi salam, they tie him up with a rope very tightly, they put him in the catapult, and they launch him into the fire. And while he's in the air, about to land in the fire, someone comes to him. Jibreel alayhi salam comes to Ibrahim alayhi salam and asks Ibrahim alayhi salam, do you need anything? Imagine yourself in this moment. Okay. You're inches away from the biggest fire you've ever seen in your entire life. And someone says, do you need help? Anybody. Be like, excuse me, yes, I need help. Do you not see what's going on? But because Ibrahim alayhi salam, he lives by principle. He says, I believe in Tawheed. No one can help me except Allah. If it's from you, then I don't need your help. But it's from Allah, I only call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where our Prophet ﷺ says that Ibrahim ﷺ made the dua, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. That sufficient for me is Allah, and He is the best disposer of affairs. And so any Muslim understands that Allah is the bestower of mercy. He alone can remove any harm or any affliction that may burden us. And so simply by reciting the dhikr, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, it can move you towards getting the help that we need. And this can be said at any time, without cause. But by knowing the meaning of this dhikr, that sufficient for us is Allah and He is the best disposer of affairs, you can understand why it can be said at any time. Because when we say this, we are declaring that we are fully trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we leave all matters to Him. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees, we should be happy. We also understand that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may have different plans for us. One that may be completely different than the plan that we have conjured up in our heads. So, by submitting to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we leave our affairs to Him. By doing this, we actually lift a heavy load on our own shoulders. And it's a spiritual healing in one's life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever trusts and relies upon Allah, then He is sufficient for him. Sisters, you can feel free to use this space. This space is completely empty. It looks like the sisters' area is getting pretty full. So, if you so wish, inshallah. And this phrase, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, it's an easy one to remember. Right? Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. And inshallah, it will give us great strength to overcome whatever we face. We push towards attaining our goals in this life and the hereafter. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the prayer of Ibrahim alayhi salam, قُلْنَا يَا نَارُ كُونِي بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا عَلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. We ordered the fire to be cool and safe for Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the ropes that were tied to Ibrahim alayhi salam, those burned off. But they did not leave a mark on Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so this reliance and complete trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when we live a life of tawheed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not abandon you. He will not forsake us. And this is echoed in the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Your Lord, O Prophet, has not abandoned you, nor has He become hateful towards you. And so it said that Ibrahim alayhi salam stayed in that fire for 40 or 50 days. It was burning for 40, 50 days before the fire was able to be put out on its own. And Ibrahim alayhi salam himself said that those 40 or 50 days are the best days of my life. I wish the days that I spent in the fire were similar to the days that I spent for the rest of my life. Because all he had in that moment was Allah. All he can do in that moment while he's waiting for the fire to be put out is worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for 40, 50 days straight, he's doing nothing but worshiping Allah. And so when you fulfill your purpose, وَمَا خَلَقْتَ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not created jinn or mankind except to worship. When you fulfill your purpose, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will find that this is the best life to live. So the fire finally withers away, and the people who were watching, faces are covered in ash, clothes are burned, everything that they ruined in order to make the fire large. And what do they see? Ibrahim alayhi salam, he walks out of the fire without a bead of sweat on his forehead and without a single mark of burn on his clothes or on his skin. And so they're amazed. And they shout and they cry and they yell and they say, Ibrahim alayhi salam's God has saved him from the flames. This is another lesson of the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam is in Surah Al-Baqarah. After this transpires, something else transpires shortly after. There was a king amongst all the fervor that was happening. His name is King Nimrud. And he was the king of the entire world, not just Babylon, but the entire world. And so King Nimrud, he wants to challenge Ibrahim alayhi salam because he's arrogant and he thinks he's the most powerful. He wants to debate Ibrahim alayhi salam and he wants to humiliate Ibrahim alayhi salam in front of everybody. So he calls Ibrahim alayhi salam, he challenges him to a debate. And Surah Al-Baqarah tells us how this debate went down. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِي حَاجَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ. That are you, O Prophet, not aware of the one who argued with Ibrahim alayhi salam about his Lord because Allah had granted him kingship? إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّيَ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he debates and he says that my Rabb, my Lord, gives life and death. And so this King Nimrud, he says, قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. He says, I also bring life and death. And so what happened is King Nimrud, he found someone amongst his prisoners that was set to be executed, and he freed him. And he said, see, I determine when someone is either dead or alive. So everyone says, oh, you think you're all smart. You think you got me. Right? What did he say? قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْتِي بِالشَّمْسِ مِنَ الْمَشْرِقِ فَأْتِ بِهَا مِنَ الْمَغْرِبِ. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says that, oh, you think you're all smart? My Lord rises the sun from the east. So if you truly are all powerful, you tomorrow morning rise the sun from the west. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. He was dumbfounded. He was dumbstruck. The disbeliever. وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And Allah does not guide those who are wrongdoers. And King Nimrud, not having a response, you know, some of the books of history of Baioumy and Nihaya by Ibn Kathir mentioned that King Nimrud, he challenges Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he says that I'm challenging Allah's army. Sorry. I'm challenging Allah's army. Bring Allah's army to me, and I'll fight Allah's army. So King Nimrud even builds a very large tower because he wants to go up to the sky and kill Allah. Ridiculous. If there's anything you learn from the story, is that powerful people aren't always smart. Okay? They're not correlated at all. And so King Nimrud, he brings his hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings his army. And who's his army? Does anybody know? A mosquito. All Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings is a mosquito. And this mosquito, it goes through the entire army of King Nimrud. It goes up the nose of King Nimrud. It goes onto his brain and it starts digging at the brain of King Nimrud, causing him to go crazy. And so he tells his soldiers to kill the mosquito. So the soldiers don't know what to do. And so he tells them to bash his head on the wall. So the soldiers are grabbing his head and they're bashing it on the wall in order to try to kill this mosquito. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused King Nimrud to live longer than he was supposed to in that situation. So he can feel that pain, and then eventually he passed away after being repeatedly hit in the head and smashed his head against the wall. This is the result of people that try to challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the next principle of Ibrahim alayhi salam is the principle of mercy. And one of the most beautiful aspects of living a life of principle is that it points out the flaw in our own human reasoning. It points out the short-sightedness of our emotions when we become overcome with emotion. But principles are tried, they're tested, they're divinely inspired, and that's why they will never make you falter. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. Turn back to this, reflect to this, remember the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the book of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And this will demonstrate the principles that will guide you in the most difficult circumstances. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He continues in Surah Maryam, starting from verse 41. Tells us a very gut-wrenching conversation that Ibrahim alayhi salam has with his father. And many brothers and sisters in this room may have had similar conversations, especially those who may be converts. And my heart goes out to you because I cannot imagine how difficult that must be. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِ لِمَ تَعْبُدُ مَا لَا يَسْمَعُ وَلَا يُبْصِرُ وَلَا يُغْنِي عَنْكَ شَيْئًا. He says, Ya Abati. And Ya Abati doesn't mean like, oh dad, or sup pops, or what's going on. No. Ya Abati is the most beautiful and loving way that you can call to your father in the Arabic language. It formally translates as, oh my beloved father. So Ibrahim alayhi salam is talking to his father, the man who raised him, the man who took care of him, the man who protected him and provided for him. You know, sometimes when we talk about these stories, we talk about them in the third person. Right? So we'll say like, Abu Lahab betrayed the Prophet ﷺ. Next, move on. No. Humanize these situations. Abu Lahab is the paternal uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. He's the man who's supposed to take care of him. He's the man who's supposed to provide for him, who's supposed to be and support him every step of the way. That's the man that betrayed the Prophet ﷺ. We have to humanize this struggle. So imagine Ibrahim alayhi salam, who's carrying the truth of all truths in his heart, who has carried out every possible intellectual, emotional, and spiritual exercise, all leading him back to one conclusion, which is La ilaha illallah. And so at that moment, he is sitting there, and he's talking to his most beloved person in his life. So now, for all of us listening, imagine for a moment that you are talking to the most important person in your life. Because the Quran is not supposed to, the stories in the Quran is not for us to just be like, ooh, how fascinating. It's supposed to make us introspective. It's supposed to make us reflect. To turn that into implementation and action. So he says to his father, oh my dear father, why do you worship what can neither hear nor see nor benefit you at all? Can we please talk? Can we understand one another? Because it does not make sense to me. Ibrahim alayhi salam is being genuine because elsewhere in the Quran we learn that his father's name is Azar. And Azar, not only did he worship idols, but he was an idol builder. So think about that for a second. He would build the idols and then he would worship what he created. Like, make it make sense. Right? Well, how are you worshiping what you created? Ya abati inni qad ja'ani min al-'ilmi man lam ya'tika fattabi'ni ahdika siratan sawiyya. Again, ya abati. Repeating that phrase so that there's no confusion here that I love you, my father. Oh, my beloved father. I have received some knowledge which you have not received yet. Look at the humility here. Ibrahim alayhi salam is a prophet of Allah. If he wanted to, he has full right to just say to his father, you must obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You must follow me. I have the truth, you don't have the truth, etc., etc., etc. He's a prophet of Allah. He's the most knowledgeable person. But instead he says that I have some knowledge that has not reached you yet. Does not make me better in any way. Maybe when that knowledge reaches you, you'll actually be better than me. And there's knowledge that you have that I don't. This is the humility of Ibrahim alayhi salam talking to his father. Ya abati la ta'budu shaytan. Oh my father, my beloved father, please do not worship shaitan, because shaitan is ever rebellious against the most compassionate. Ya abati, inni akhafu an yamassaka 'adhabun min ar-Rahman. Oh my dear father, I truly fear that you will be touched by a torment from the most compassionate and become shaitan's companion in the hellfire. So he speaks to his father with repeated affirmations of love. Now let's think about this. The logic is on the side of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The emotions are on the side of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He spoke respectfully, and he spoke the truth, and he spoke lovingly. Now again, imagine yourself in that scenario, talking to the most beloved person in your life. Then the father of Ibrahim alayhi salam, what does he do? He responds. And instead of responding in the way that Ibrahim alayhi salam talked to him with, he responded by lashing out. قال أراغب أنت عن آلهتي يا إبراهيم? Are you going to, how dare you reject my idols? If you do not desist, I will stone you to death. Physical threats now. وَهْجُرْنِي مَلِيًّا. Leave me. And وَهْجُرْنِي, it's not like وَتْرُكْنِي or da'ni, like leave for now. Hijra or wahjurni comes from the word hijra, which means like leave for good, like migrate, get out of here. And maliya means a very far, very far away. Maliyan actually has two meanings, because maliyan is in the Arabic language, it's a word that is dharf zaman and dharf makan, which denotes time and denotes place. So maliyan doesn't mean just leave for a very long time, but also very far away. Right? Very far away. So now think of that response. Imagine someone says you're dead to me. What would your response be? I know what my response would be. Right? I'd probably say, to hell with you. Ibrahim alayhi salam is a man of principle, and I'm not a good person. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he responds to his father, I have a code. I have principles that I have to fulfill. I have to conduct myself with the first and foremost principles, which is the concept of mercy. قال سلام عليك سأستغفر لك ربي إنه كان بي حفيا. He says, peace be upon you. No harm will come to you from me. I will pray to my Lord for your forgiveness. And he has truly been most gracious to me. Now, technical issue. It's later clarified in the Quran, in the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that when it comes to someone who does not believe in Islam, we don't make dua for their forgiveness, we make dua for their guidance. We make dua for their guidance. That's if they are still alive. And so he says, I will distance myself from all of this. I will distance myself from invoking other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will continue to call upon my Lord alone. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam, he left on his own. But because he lives a life full of principle, and he believes in tawheed, he believes in mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards him by giving him a great gift. Your family turned their back on you, I'm going to give you a better family. He had children, Ismail alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam. And those children are where the rest of the prophets, the lineage comes from. Concluding with our beloved Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But this is the result of someone who lives their life with principle, who did what they needed to do, who stood his ground, who stood by his principles. Now the last and final principle I want to talk about today is the principle of sacrifice. فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he wanted a son. And he did not have a son for most of his life. He was very, very elderly age. It said about 83, 85 years of age, before he received the glad tidings that he was going to have a son, Ismail alayhi salam. And when Ismail alayhi salam became a young man, a young adult, Ibrahim alayhi salam saw a dream. And in this dream, he saw that he had to sacrifice his son Ismail alayhi salam, his only child. And so after this dream, we're told that the dream of a prophet is revelation. He goes to his son. And he says, فَانْظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. Tell me, my son, what do you think? Let's pause here for a moment. This is very beautiful. Because Ibrahim alayhi salam does not force his son to submit. Because Ibrahim alayhi salam did the proper tarbiyah, mentorship of his son as a young boy, and showed the proper love to his son as a young boy. Now that his son is older, he does not need to force his son to submit, because his son already has love of Allah in his heart. So he gives Ismail alayhi salam the opportunity to show that and to shine himself. And what does Ismail alayhi salam say? Ya abati fa'al ma tu'mar. Oh my beloved father, do as you were commanded. SubhanAllah. Ismail alayhi salam also says what? Ya abati. Oh my beloved father. The same phrase that Ibrahim alayhi salam told his father. Now Allah Ta'ala, what must have been going through the mind of Ibrahim alayhi salam, but I have no doubt that Ibrahim alayhi salam must have been so proud of his son in this moment. سَتَجْدُنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الصَّابِرِينَ. You will find me amongst those who are steadfast. Ismail alayhi salam is saying this. Now, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we talk about this as the sacrifice of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It's not the sacrifice of Ibrahim alayhi salam, it's the sacrifice of an entire family. Ismail alayhi salam also had to sacrifice his self. Hajar alayhi salam had to sacrifice her son. This is the sacrifice of an entire family. And so the story continues. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he takes his son Ismail alayhi salam and he lies him on his side. And he puts the knife to his neck. Now here is where we often get confused, because sometimes it was told to us, maybe as kids, that Ibrahim alayhi salam was about to sacrifice his son, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped it, and then the ram came down, that was sacrificed instead. That's not what happened. Ibrahim alayhi salam actually cut. Now it changes the story, because not only was he about to do it, he actually did it. What happened though is the knife didn't cut. But Ibrahim alayhi salam did the action that he was supposed to do, and then was replaced by a ram. And so again, Ibrahim alayhi salam is teaching us that no matter what the call is, no matter what the command is, the principle of sacrifice to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you live by this principle, then you will never falter. And now the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam is a household name. They have so much respect from the major religions. All major religions lay claim to Ibrahim alayhi salam. They're called the Abrahamic faiths. Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ يَهُودِيًّا وَلَا نَصْرَانِيًّا وَلَكِنْ كَانَ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. That Ibrahim alayhi salam was not of the Jewish faith or of the Christian faith. Rather, he is a upright, dedicated to Allah, Muslim, and he's not of the idolaters. And so in our lives, no one will ever be asked to sacrifice as much as Ibrahim alayhi salam was asked to sacrifice. So if he can sacrifice, so can we. And the greatest blessing that we have been given is La ilaha illallah. That if Allah wanted us and wanted to ask of us to do what he asked of Ibrahim alayhi salam, it would be of no fault to him. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already gave us everything. He gave us Islam. He opened the doors of Jannah for us, that's why we're here. But what does he ask of us? He asks us to wake up early. Sacrifice some sleep. The warmth of our beds and pray to him. Sacrifice your phones every once in a while and the endless streams of Netflix and recite the Quran. He wants us to sacrifice whatever worldly pleasure we are saving up for in this world. Whether it's an extension on the home, a new car, give it up to those who are hungry. Sacrifice it for those who are suffering from pain, from disease, from oppression. Give up our small comforts to give comfort to others. He wants us to sacrifice our ego, the very thing that brings about so much destruction and death in the world. The ego that causes us to fight with one another. The ego that causes us to have pride in who is right or who is wrong, and to alienate one another. He asks us to sacrifice that. They say that I'm okay, I see the other person, I forgive the other person, I love the other person, I show compassion and mercy, because that's the legacy of the Prophet. So as you can see, the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam was a life of principle. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he did not achieve much material-wise. When he passed away with a few followers. When Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba, he built the Kaaba in a barren desert. And he made dua that this place will one day be prosperous and that there will be a messenger sent amongst them. And that's the result of that is that dua is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's only two people in the Quran that are called uswatun hasana in the Quran. Only 2 people. And Uswatun Hasana is a perfect example. Someone who is a perfect example, an excellent role model. Number 1 is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the second is Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so the result of the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the greatest creation ever known to mankind. And during his time, Mecca was not a prosperous city. Now we have right now, as we are speaking, 2.5 million people in that city that are performing Hajj. Most there ever has been in one time. Millions of people are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the year there. It's a thriving city. Every fruit you can possibly imagine is there. Every food. They got halal McDonald's, halal KFC, they got everything there. They got halal Five Guys. I think it closed down actually, because I was trying to find it last time I was there, I couldn't find it. I was so sad. But everything is there. And Ibrahim alayhi salam was not alive to see that result. He was not alive to see it. But that's where we get confused. Our success has never been about results. It's about effort. And that's the difference between a faith-driven person versus a materialistic, results-driven person. When Allah's hukm comes, the Nabi does not look at the consequences. They're driven by Allah's hukm, not by his results. So when Ibrahim alayhi salam was asked to sacrifice his son, he was also asked to sacrifice his legacy. And we know that prophethood is inherited from the father. So if Ibrahim alayhi salam sacrifices his only son, not knowing if he's going to have another one later on, not only is Ibrahim alayhi salam being asked to sacrifice his son, he's being asked to sacrifice prophethood. Can you imagine that? He's being asked to sacrifice the entire legacy of prophethood. So, from a results perspective, there's no way. But instead, the sacrifice is a reflection of Ibrahim alayhi salam's spirit. And that is what we want to inherit. That whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to do, I will not look at the results or the consequences, I will just do as He tells me to do. But unfortunately, many of us today look at the consequences, and if it doesn't match up with our ideals, we say, nah, I'm not going to do that. But that's not the spirit. Our spirit has gone. What we need to do is revive that spirit of saying whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, labbaik. I'm coming to you, Allah. I am here. And the spirit was not only shown in Ibrahim alayhi salam, but it was also shown in Ismail alayhi salam, and more importantly, more specifically, Ismail alayhi salam's mother, Hajar alayhi salam. Many people today, Western academia and Western media, I think it's become very clear that I'm a Western academia hater, but it's okay. They lay this claim that women do not contribute in Islam. Excuse me, but what a dumb thing to say. Look at this woman, Hajar alayhi salam. Her contribution is not only huge, it's civilizational. Women in Islam contribute greatly. They have contributed greatly, they'll continue to contribute greatly, and they currently contribute greatly, and they will contribute greatly. So don't listen to those who say otherwise in Western media or don't understand Islamic history of the Quran. But Hajar alayhi salam was one of the greatest mothers this earth has ever seen. And other than being a worshipper of Allah, a mother is the greatest role, blessing, and gift that a woman can uphold. So Hajar alayhi salam tried to do what any other mother would do. That's save her child. She's running between Safa and Marwa. And she's not doing an act of worship. She was running like any other mother would, trying to see if there's any water, trying to see if there's somebody that has water, because her son is thirsty and in the middle of a desert. And this effort, what she did, is called sa'i, which literally means effort. In the Arabic language, sa'i literally means effort. So Ismail alayhi salam, he inherited this spirit from his mother. She did not know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to bring forth water from under Ismail alayhi salam's ankles, but it happened. And now we have the Zamzam, which is the miracle well of water that never ends. So we gotta make the effort. We go through the motions, we work hard. It's not befitting for a Muslim to complain and act like a victim. No. We go through the motions. We protect ourselves. We work hard. We do the sa'i. We go through the effort. Without worrying about the consequences or results, we just do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of us, and the results are in His hands. The sa'i of Hajr alayhi salam is now a civilization of value. That when you want to perform the ritual of Hajj or Umrah, you have to do the sa'i. You have to do it. So millions of people every year are fulfilling this ritual. So don't undermine women. A pious, Allah-driven woman who sees the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is without a doubt exceptional. And whatever problems we have in our life, whatever we go through, the motions, whenever we're making the effort, don't wait for divine decree to just take over. Go through the motions. If we go through the motions the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us, then whatever the result is, that was the best result. And an advice as well for maybe anybody that might be involved in activism or politics or any other public figure professions, live by this principle and by the principles of Ibrahim alayhi salam. We don't want to be ones that fall for one side saying that if you don't vote for us, if you don't advocate for us, then the other side will oppress you, or vice versa. That if you don't vote for us or advocate for us, the other side will take your kids away. We as Muslims, we need to be smarter than that and not fall into those games. We don't act based on fear, we act based on principle. And we won't fall for the fear-mongering. As a matter of fact, we see it as an act of bigotry when some will only accept our rights when we submit to their ways of thinking. If I am okay with compromising my morals for comfort in this life, then that is the actions of someone who is result and consequence driven, and that's not someone that we want to be. But if I do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of me, tells me to do, what He wants me to do, and I submit to Him, regardless of the societal pressure, regardless of the societal views or reactions that might take place, then it's okay. Because my actions are faith-driven. And at the end of the day, this world is temporary. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us that we're in this world like travelers. We're all just trying to go home. We're all just trying to go home. And in 1 second in our destination in the afterlife, after one moment, not even a second, a moment of our destination in the afterlife, whether it is Jahannam or Jannah, whether it's the hellfire or heaven, will cause us to either forget any joy that we had in this life or forget any pain. And that is where we will be forever, without any death and without any end. So we want to be a faith-driven person. And so this is the value, the civilizational value, the principles, the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hajar alayhi salam, and Ismail alayhi salam together. You don't separate them. You don't separate them. This is the legacy of an entire family. The remaining time, inshallah, let's make some dua, because this is the best day of the year. What's wrong with the Zoom? No, I'm online. Yeah. Yeah, we're going. Okay. Okay. In a little bit, inshallah. Later, inshallah. So, today's the day of Araffa. We have about half an hour before Maghrib. So this is the hour which dua is accepted. So we want to take a moment and make dua, inshallah ta'ala, in the best day of the year and in the best hour of the day. Allahumma laka alhamdu kullu, wa laka shukru kullu, wa ilayka yurja al-amru kullu. Alaniyatu wa sirru, ahlun anta an tu'bad, ahlun anta an tuhmad. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. اللهم إنا نستعينك ونستغفرك ونؤمن بك ونتوكل عليك ونثني عليك الخير ونشكرك ولا نكفرك ونخلع ونترك من يبترك. اللهم إياك نعبد ولك نصلي ونشرد وإليك نسعى ونحفظ نرجو رحمتك ونخشى عذابك إن عذابك بالكفار محق. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت إنك تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت. O Allah, we turn to you in repentance and in submission, and we beg you to fulfill our du'as. O Allah, we ask you to forgive our sins, a complete forgiveness that leaves no trace. O Allah, we ask you to forgive our transgressions of your commands and the violations of the rights of people. And we ask you to grant us victory over our own shortcomings and our own desires. And O Allah, we ask you to reform us and upgrade us. And we ask you to accept our du'as and our ibadah and our deeds. And to guide us towards performing good accepted deeds for your sake only. O Allah, we ask you to help us to attain khushu' and ikhlas in our ibadah. And to help us get closer to you as our end draws near. And we ask you, O Allah, to make us love you and your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and your deen and your Quran the way it deserves to be loved. O Allah, we ask you to increase our iman and our tawakkul and our yaqeen in you, and to increase our taqwa, and to make us grateful servants of you. And to give us the strength to be steadfast throughout the trials that we encounter, and to give us a soft heart and to be content with your laws. O Allah, make the Quran a companion for us both in this life and in the next. And guide us towards the Sirat al-Mustaqim until our last breath. And that we may never be deviated in shirk or kufr or bid'ah. O Allah, we ask you to make us amongst the muhsineen, amongst the muttaqeen, amongst the mukhliseen, and the sabiqun fil ilm. O Allah, we ask you to increase us in beneficial knowledge and to protect us from any sicknesses of the heart, whether it be envy or arrogance or proudness or showing off or any other sickness. O Allah, we ask you to bless us with happiness in this dunya and akhirah, and to protect us from sadness and depression. O Allah, we ask you to favor us with the ability to do tazkiyah of our souls throughout our life journey. And O Allah, we ask you to remove the love of this world in its degrees and forms from our hearts, and to invite us to your house so that we can worship you, and to grant us a good end and make us love to meet you, and to make the grave and our barzakh a peaceful and cool abode, and to grant us the shade of your arsh on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and to give us our record of deeds in our right hand and make the mizan heavy with the good deeds. O Allah, we ask you to grant us the favor of being able to drink from the Hawd al-Kawthar by our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hand. O Allah, we ask you to ease our crossing of the Sirat and the Qantara. O Allah, we ask you to favor us with the ultimate bliss of seeing you in the hereafter. O Allah, we ask you to shield us, to increase us, and to protect the love and mercy and barakah between us and our spouses for as long as we live. O Allah, improve our behavior with each other. And O Allah, reward our spouses with your best reward for their striving in our families. O Allah, make the Quran and your command to be our judge in all matters. Strengthen our practice of the deen. And Ya Allah, join us all together in bliss in Jannat al-Firdaus. O Allah, we ask you to assist us with the physical and emotional strength that it requires to be good parents and to be good examples for our children. And O Allah, we ask you to save our children from the impact of our mistakes in their lives. And O Allah, we ask you to bless us with righteous children. O Allah, we ask you to, anybody who is oppressed, anybody who is going through hardship and trial, to free them from that oppression and grant them victory. And all the places around the globe, all the Muslim countries around the globe, and all the Muslims who are going through oppression and trial. And O Allah, we ask you to free Masjid al-Aqsa from the oppression of the wrongdoing and oppressive people of the Israeli state. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا مولانا إنك أنت الغفور الرحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نعوذ برضاك من سخطك وبمعافتك من عقوبتك وبك منك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب ما يحبك وحب كل عمل يقربنا إلى حبك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. So inshallah ta'ala, we have about 20 minutes until sunset. So my request to everyone is to remain silent, remain seated where you are. And for these 20 minutes, just busy yourself in dua and dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want a dhikr that you want to say, if you can't think of du'as to make, the best dhikr to do on the day of Arafah is La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah lahu al-mulku lahu al-hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. But this is the day of acceptance. This is the day and the hour that our sins will be forgiven, that sorrows will be alleviated, that illnesses will be cured, that bachelors and bachelorettes will be paired with righteous spouses, that our hearts will fill with iman. This is the hour in which we are free from the hellfire, in which we reserve our spots and our houses in Jannah because of dua. So as I mentioned, if we can just have everyone please remain silent and make dua until the Maghrib Salah, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.